Hello, everybody. It is June 5th, 2024, and this is the weekly meeting of the Neural Network Group, the most exciting group of language teachers you can possibly imagine. And we're very glad to have everybody here today. And we have a guest today with us, Jerry Registre, who's going to be talking to us about his new LangTalk app that he has just launched. And then also, I'm hoping Lavinia Rogers is going to be joining us. She posed a very interesting question that I think relates closely to this idea of our increasing availability of tools that are primarily based in technology and how we use those and handle those in the classroom and for checking off compliance pieces. What can we really do with them? So we will be discussing all of that. So as we get started, and welcome to everybody. And Nancy, I was just saying that we're really happy to see your smiling face after an absence. And I wish we had more time that we could catch up on the trip to Guatemala. I'm sure it was wonderful. But Nancy, I already explained that you'll have to be jumping in and out.
Okay,
So
thanks.
we have a lot of jumpers today. And here's Michelle jumping twice, so she's coming in another, she's coming in incognito as well. I'm going to put a link to the yeah, oh good, here comes Lavinia. Let me put a link to today's agenda in the notes there in the chat, and you can pull that up. But Lavinia, so happy to have you with us. And I was just explaining the reason I really was excited to have you with us is because of this conversation that we're going to be having today with Jerry. And I was just wondering, maybe before he gets here, if you could sort of briefly explain what prompted your reaching out to me last week or the week before, and some of your other thoughts about that.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see all of your faces. So we, in New Jersey, we have the Office of Standards, which I operate in, which is supposed to support the implementation of our world language standards. And every county in New Jersey has an education office that is responsible for making sure that school districts are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They are the
Compliance.
Thank you, compliance aspect. We are the support aspect. And as part of helping them to figure out whether or not school districts are doing what they need to in terms of world language, I had put together some guidance that built on what was done by my predecessors, and it took the route of trying to educate, like, what specifically around, well, around everything, but also around like the interpersonal mode, which is what we tend to yeah, so it's where the biggest barrier to school districts offering Duolingo. And I'm sorry, my computer's moving around. My cat is using it as a way to scratch his face. So they so I sent out the guidance providing the information that an interpersonal mode was about, and you can see the definition at the top, but that it was about exchanging information and negotiating meaning between people, and that, as a footnote, that programs like Duolingo or Babbel or Rosetta Stone didn't meet the requirements for the interpersonal mode of communication, and that and AI technology that kind of left it open. That document has been circulating amongst our counties for probably 8 months now, and one county it asked the question as to whether or not I anticipated that my guidance would change around interpersonal communication standards and with the given the advancements of AI technologies. And I was like, I don't know, if I knew the answer to that, I probably would not be working at the New Jersey Department of Education. And then promptly emailed Tom and said, I need help. I said, I've done some playing with AI, either as a practitioner of language or speaker of languages, or as an educator, and in my role at the New Jersey Department of Education. But I said, I don't know everything, and so I need help.
So, Lavinia, this is really a fascinating question for us, and I'm glad to have Jerry here with us today too, because Jerry can kind of give us the perspective of somebody outside the profession who's very deeply involved in this realm of helping people learn languages. And so I'd like to take our time now and turn it over to Jerry, and then after he's had a chance to talk to us about his new app, then we can bring in these concepts that you've mentioned, Lavinia, and see where we can come out in terms of maybe providing some guidance to our colleagues who are going to be working with this, because certainly we have come so far in just 3 or 4 years. Well, remember in the midst of the pandemic when we had schools saying, can we just put kids on Duolingo for an hour a day and call it good on our part? And obviously the answer is no. So Jerry, we're very glad to have you with us. I don't even want to take time to have everybody introduce themselves. You've met many of us before, but we consider you our special guest. If this were Saturday Night Live, you would be getting one of the special blazers as the person who's been our guest most often. But we really appreciate the work that you've been doing and your journey as a language learner. So I'll turn it over to you for a while and you can tell us about Lang Talk. And I hope I got the name right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Tom, and thanks everyone. Super, super excited to see you all. I always, I marveled that there was like a community of people that just loved languages and was sort of spreading that around the world. And so I geek out whenever I get to join this call. But it's always exciting to be with this group. I want to quickly test something just before to make sure that sound is. Let me know if you're able to listen to sound if I play this, just so I can demo something for you all. Let me see. Are you able to hear sound by any chance?
No. No.
That's a good heads up. We might have to go soundless.
Let me see, is there anything that I need to do on my end? Because I know sometimes, there's a thing about if I'm going to be playing a recording.
Let me see. No.
Oh, we heard a little bit of audio. I thought it was going to work.
Did it have to do with, when you share that you have to share with sound?
Yeah, I think
that's an
I'm
obvious
doing,
thing, but
let's see if it's not working. I can try another way, actually. Let's see.
And if not, our standard workaround has been for you to do your audio from the phone and still keep your video on here, but that gets a little bit convoluted to avoid feedback, but
let's give that another go. Let's see. Still no. Okay. Maybe I can try without sound and see if it lets me share that. While I'm setting this up, actually, I would love an intro to Lavinia's topic, actually, just to get a sense for how the discussion's been going around. From the curricular perspective, I was missing a bit of background context. I can share some specific things that we've been exploring as we build this app, but I would love to get a bit of background context to shape some of the topics that I talked about.
Well, briefly, if I may, Lavinia, I would say it's the idea that many classroom teachers, fortunately, look at several different modes of language use, one of which that corresponds closely to our proficiencies is interpersonal communication. And that has always been a challenge in a classroom because you only had one teacher who was probably fluent in the language and learners who weren't. So it was always difficult, but it was always a goal. So with the advent of some of the early technology, like Babbel and Duolingo and others, schools, especially those who didn't have a language teacher, began to ask, could we use something like this in order to give our students interpersonal practice? But it really stretches that idea of interpersonal, because even though they may be responding in the language to prompts, they're not responding to anyone, and there was no sort of a sustained idea. And Lavinia there has put in a brief definition of interpersonal. So that's kind of where we're going, because now with advent of tools such as yours, it is possible for a learner not only to communicate back and forth in a sustained way with a chat bot, but it is also possible now to have the transcript of that conversation recorded, which could also then be given to the teacher as evidence or to whomever. So is that enough for you, Jerry? And Lavinia and others, have I done an adequate job of maybe setting the stage for that?
Super helpful. Okay. I found a workaround. Let's do this. It's gonna be exciting.
Okay.
All right. So before I actually show you how the app works, I wanted to give a quick little background as to like why we did this, why did this in the first place, besides the fact that I just love building things and languages. So I was very motivated to learn Spanish all the way back in grade school. I've always thought it was a really fascinating language. And I found that reading and listening came very easy to me. But writing and speaking did not. And when I thought a little bit deeper, I realized it's because I'm an independent learner. I love just to grab a whole bunch of books, go in my corner, and come out 3 days later and share what I've learned with the world. And so I had all the tools that I needed to study solo for reading and for listening. I could read books, I could listen to music, listen to shows, listen to audiobooks. I felt like I had the tools to practice those two modes, but I couldn't practice speaking on my own. And similar for writing, because you also need some input back. So I felt those two things slowed me down a lot, especially as it relates to speaking, which for me felt like the most important. And so when I left grade school, I finally had a few bucks. So I said, all right, let me get some, I found language exchange apps. I found language teachers, and those were my solutions to being able to practice speaking. But I then started working, quickly shifted to an 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. as like my little sliver of time to practice languages. So that became really, really difficult to organize sessions with people. I was also worried about whenever I would have these sessions, I always wanted to just keep going and going and going, and I would worry about bothering the other person. And I wanted to be able to just make mistakes freely and keep speaking and keep speaking. And so the time always felt short. So 2 years back, I made that AI video on ChatGPT when I first saw it come out. Everyone is using it for a bunch of other purposes, and my mind immediately went to languages because I thought it had potential to fill two missing puzzle pieces. One, to be able to like correct your writing, but then most importantly for me was to be able to speak. So just the idea that you could speak as much as you wanted and get as much practice on your own schedule was really appealing to me. And I waited for someone to develop a better app. I actually reached out to OpenAI. I said like, hey, this is great what you have. Can you build some tools to be able to speak to this easier for language learners? Didn't hear back, so I kept waiting. A few apps did start coming out, but I think they all felt too distracting and gamified and charting you through a course. I didn't really want a course. I just wanted a tool that I could pick up and use whenever I wanted. So I said, you know what? I like tech. I like tinkering. Let me just try to do this on my own to have available to use. And so that's what Lang Talk was meant to be. Just a tool that you can pick up and speak and speak as much as you want to learn new words along the way and practice conversation. I selfishly built it for myself, but I thought this would be useful for other people as well. So I said, let me just make this available so that I can have this platform, anyone can use it, and we can use it to practice speaking and learn different languages. So I will show you a super quick demo of how Lang Talk works. I wanted it to, the MVP that I shipped out is, I built it 2 weeks ago. I shipped it 2 weeks ago, but kept it very not distracted, just conversations. So one example of something that you could do is go to something like, I built a bunch of these avatars to be able to practice different styles of conversations. So I could start a conversation and do something like just start a conversation for me in Spanish. And it gives me a fun little scene that I'm in Barcelona at a street food festival. I approach a stand, there's a chef waiting for me, and the chef says, hola, bienvenido a nuestro puesto. Hoy tenemos unas gambas que están, right? ¿Te gustaría probar? Would I like to try them? And where am I from? So great, I could then just tap on the mic and respond to this. Let's see. Jump back in, tap on the mic. Hola, muy buenos días. Cuéntame algo más de lo que tienes. Me gustaría probar algo. And I would just speak. And then I would get a response back. And we could just continue to have a
Por
conversation.
supuesto. Además de las gambas al ajillo,
Sound
tenemos pulpo a la gallega con pimentón y aceite de oliva. Es uno de nuestros platos más populares. También ofrecemos paella de mariscos que preparamos aquí mismo. ¿Te interesa algo de esto o prefieres otra cosa?
So I get a response back and I can continue the conversation. And then I also wanted to be able to make mistakes freely. So let's say if mi comido favorito, me gustó mucho la paella. So with this mode, I wanted to be able to get
Correction.
corrections.
Mi comida favorita. Me gusta mucho la paella. Comido se refiere a una acción pasada. Comida es el sustantivo correcto. Además,
So with this, it just gives me a quick little correction for what I said. And it tries to teach me a little lesson about how I can improve it for next time. And then we were back in conversation mode, continuing the conversation. And with this, I just felt like it was I thought this would be a good tool to just, especially for someone who's at maybe a B1 or B2 level, to just keep speaking and speaking, get little lessons along the way. There's also ways to turn off the correction if you just want to sort of practice without getting corrections. And then I created a couple of other modes that people could use. So I thought about, if I start a new language, I might not have the confidence to speak from day one. I wanted some way I still think that conversation is just really, really important, even for someone who's beginning. So I wanted a way to be able to, when I first started learning Spanish, I would do these drills where I would learn a phrase in Spanish, or in English, say in English, say in Spanish, and just keep going back and forth until I felt more comfortable. And that's how I started saying words for the first time, being comfortable. So this mode is essentially that drill where I get to say a phrase, I get to speak, even if I only know a little bit of Spanish, I can use as much English as I need to, and it'll speak to me in two languages. So I could do something like, hola, this is my first day speaking Spanish, and estoy muy emocionado. That's pretending if I just knew a few words to start my Spanish journey, I could still get into the practice of speaking and get comfortable being in the
Hello, this is my first day speaking Spanish and I'm very excited. Hola, este es mi primer día hablando español y estoy muy emocionado. That's fantastic.
And the purpose of this was just to help people get comfortable being in the language, speaking the language. So I had a fear of speaking when I first started. So this was one of the drills that I used to do to get myself comfortable. Wanted to show you one other mode, which is, so had the base mode, which I think is going to be good for B1, B2. I started this so that beginners could still feel comfortable in conversations. I wanted something for myself selfishly because when I was studying for my C2 Spanish exam, that required me to have this advanced university level of Spanish vocabulary and structure. And there weren't actually many people that could help me practice that. A lot of native speakers understandably don't have this university level of Spanish. So it actually took me quite a bit of time to find someone that I could practice with. So I made this mode, the professor, to just have something that I can practice really, really advanced conversations. So what this one tries to do is it tries to take everything to a very formal level and include advanced vocabulary as it's speaking. So this scene that it prepared for me is we're in a prestigious university discussing contemporary Spanish literature. It's their turn to talk about the influence of technology in the modern day narrative. And the professor says, good day, distinguished colleagues and students. And so already trying to use more advanced vocabulary. And in this mode, I might not necessarily make mistakes, but what it tries to do, whatever I say, it's going to show me how I can say that in a way that's more advanced, more formal, if I was in a collegiate academic setting. So the professor asked me, what do I think about representation of technology in the works of people like Javier Cercas and Almudena Grandes? So I could say something like, me gustaría primero adentrarme en el mundo de esta universidad. ¿Me podías contar más de ella? So I just asked to tell me more about the university first before, but using pretty normal level Spanish. And what it's going to try to do then is show me how I can say exactly what I said in a way that's a bit more advanced and then continue the conversation to keep the flow of dialogue going.
Improved. Me gustaría primero profundizar en el conocimiento acerca de esta universidad. ¿Podría usted proporcionarme más información sobre la misma?
So what I said, I'd like to talk more about this university first. Can you tell me a bit more about it? And the improved version was, so profundizar is not a word that you would learn in your first few days of learning Spanish. But I'd like to sort of think and talk and have dialogue about the areas of knowledge surrounding this university. And so this is a much more advanced way of saying what I said, and then it continues the conversation. And in just this little chunk of dialogue, I personally have a lot that I can learn. So I'm seeing words like, so let's say I didn't know what the term profundizar meant. I could then go and say, oh, this is great. Here's a new word that I don't know. Let me take it to this dictionary that we have. We have this vocabulary mode where you can type in any word and it'll tell me a lot more about where that word comes from, what it means, how it's used in different settings. So profundizar, the literal translation is like, means to deepen. But if we look for a more natural translation, let me scroll up and show you those, but it's giving me a whole bunch of things to explore this word. So it's telling me the natural way that it might be used, which is actually to explore something in depth or delve into something. Tells me a bit about the etymology of the word, how it's used across Spain and Latin America, which is important for Spanish. Some ways it's commonly used, talk about getting a deeper understanding of a topic, and then a few examples so I can actually see how I might use this in conversation. And then some more uncommon, some other ways that it's used with additional examples, how formal the term is. So basically, this is like a little mode just to deep dive a word and really, really get or a word or phrase and really get a sense for how to use it. But yeah, there's a lot of so these avatars, I kind of just build them whenever I think that there's something that language learners could need or something that I find that I'm missing. So I was having conversations, I realized I needed a way to actually just understand vocabulary, but not just a mere translation, but to go in depth. So I sat down over a weekend, I started building this, and now it's at this stage. And that's what I really want Lang Talk to be now. Just a platform for language learners. And when I see something that language learners should have, or something that I think could be helpful to me or someone else that I see learning language, I now have this platform that I can add to it. And I think this setup with avatars really allows you could add as many avatars, as many different modes as you wanted to. So one thing that I've been getting asked about is I want a way to drill a word. If I learn this word profundizar, I just want to have a conversation, just say it in 10, 50 different ways, all the different ways you can conjugate it, so I can really practice this word. So that's one mode that I thought of spending a bit of time to build. And some additional features, just things like being able to save vocabulary as flashcards or what have you, or creating role play scenarios in the same way that I programmed this to start conversations via small role plays. People want to practice role plays for in an interview setting, in a hospital setting, talking about like the military setting or technology, very specialized vocabulary. So having this platform now allows me to just geek out, build these things, make them available, and then the world has access to them if they'd like, and people can send a request for anything that they need, and I could just build it into this platform. But that's Lang Talk. I do all of the design work, and I kind of just rope friends in to help me code if I need extra hands. But this app is just sort of a labor of love I wanted to put out. I'm intending to use this to learn additional languages in the future. So as I figure out whatever it's missing, just plan to keep adding to it over time, and hopefully that this can just be a pretty distraction-free tool to practice conversation and get comfortable speaking as you're learning different languages.
You've got it copyrighted, I hope, because it's golden.
Thank you. But
Can
I
I,
was hoping that someone would build this. When I made that video, no one took me up on the offer, so I was like, let me give it a shot and see if I could put something out.
can I ask a question? Because it's AI generated with language, I presume it can do multiple accents, like, a South American or Mexican or a Castellano, Spanish.
Accents and pronunciation are going to be the hardest parts because those require very deep and complex speech models. That's one of the areas that's lacking. Text is pretty strong. Speech models, they're still in a lot of big training processes. So I think it's going to be a little bit of time before we start having accent control and to get really strong. Like, tell me how to pronounce this word, and you break down the pronunciation for me. To make that widely available. But those are two things that like I have on the top of the list for us to start. We're trying some training on our own, but it's a tough problem to crack.
Michelle, what were you gonna say?
Well, where to start? This is so cool, Jerry. So the first thing I just want to say, because you remember before when you've come and met with us, we've been working on this concept of facilitated interdependent language learning, the idea that there could be language classes like in a school during the day that were not a class that was taught by one teacher who speaks as the master of the language and all the students are supposed to be at the same level and they're all learning the same language, but rather students are selecting languages they're interested in learning and they might be at different levels. And the role of the teacher is really more of a facilitator. And of course, all your avatars sort of reflect the kinds of roles that a facilitator would have. And you could say the meta facilitator, the human, would be understanding what kind of support a student needs at a given point, like just getting started or going further or exploring vocabulary or whatever. So I love that idea, in essence, building out different facilitators, coaches that you might need. And it reminds me actually of the film Searching for Bobby Fischer. I don't know if any of you've seen that. They showed it at a leadership training. I was at a business leadership training one time. That was the idea that at different points for different reasons, you need different kinds of coaches. And I think that's really true with learning anything probably, but especially anything when you're trying to develop your own skill. So I'm really excited about that aspect. A question. So let's take just the vocabulary example. To what extent is the text that is generated by that coming directly from the AI? And to what extent do you is there some underpinning that says when you respond to what is the vocabulary item, put these, I mean, is it like, is your creative process, if I'm not violating your creative process, to say that I want you to include, what it is, definition, some examples, like, in other words, so there's some consistency perhaps in all the entries without somebody necessarily sitting down and imagining every single vocabulary item and typing that information all out.
Exactly. So yeah, I tell it exactly to write the responses like this. So I told it to give me, keep it short, have these sections, added additional training for general vocab so it can learn from that. But it then it's freestyling on its own, where we can ask it any word or phrase. But it's sticking to the structure that I've given it and based on the examples that I've given it. So I generated a couple 100 examples, just give it those. But profundizar was not one of the words that I gave it. It's just now using those set of examples that I trained it on to be able to extrapolate for any other phrase that you might ask it.
So that's going to be part of the art of working with AI, is figuring out how do you want to package the responses that you give, so that if it's just random things each time a person went to look up a vocabulary, you wouldn't build that capacity to know what to expect and benefit from that. I mean, what I love also is the fact that I'm getting visuals while I'm getting oral. So, so I found that very helpful to me, like in Duolingo too, that my eyes are taking information while my ears are taking in and my mouth's producing, getting all of those involved at the same time is extremely helpful, I think. So thank you.
That's awesome. And that's part of the feedback cycle here, where I send this out into the YouTube world. I say, hey, let me know feedback. So someone might come and say, actually, one of the feedback I got was, hey, I always wonder whether this is used in Spain or Latin America, because when I travel, things get confusing. So I said, of course, like that happens to me all the time. And so I added this one for countries and regions where it talks about whether it's widely used across them or it's used differently, and a little deep dive on Spain and Latin America nuance to see if it's tripping there. Spain and Latin America wants to see if there's like different usage across the countries for the term. So yeah, I take feedback and change existing avatars, or if someone has a use that's like, I wanted to just correct, just like replace a word that I said with something more advanced, and then don't continue the conversation until I get it right. Make me repeat it. We could also have it do that. So there's a lot of it's a really a canvas. And now whatever people end up sending as requests for things that they need, or just that we discover that we think would be helpful, we can just add as an additional assistant or change any of the existing assistants to craft that teacher the way that you want it to help you.
That's one of the most remarkable parts of what I'm seeing here, Jerry, is that ability to craft for the learner, to be able to craft the teaching aspect to be what it needs to be for that individual learner. And it's one of those things where I think as a profession, we have to be on the forefront of helping states and districts and schools look at these tools in a much different way, because what you're showing us today, it just blows the socks off of anything that we could have imagined even a couple of years ago. It's just amazing. And you haven't mentioned it too much, but you are in the process of trying to add on additional languages, if I remember from your video.
Yeah, so luckily we can just leverage a lot of the model's initial training on the web. So it can naturally do a lot of languages. If I asked it to, I could I could switch out of the Spanish mode and ask it to speak to me in Dutch instead, and it would try to. The way that I'm thinking about doing this is creating a different set of assistants for each language, since there's some nuances where in Spanish it's important to have the subjunctive mood is really important. The nuance between Spain and Latin America is really, really important. So I try to customize the Spanish teachers to be really good just for Spanish. And that's how I'm thinking about the other languages. Like learn about the language, which is why I have all these as beta, because I'm not an expert in French and Japanese. So I have friends and people just advise it with, here are some things that are unique to French, so I can customize the French assistance to be good. I could just put something that's sort of like detect my language, and I may do that, where it lets you freestyle. I'm worried that it might miss some nuances of the language, but it should still be good enough for you to practice. You could, in theory, use it for any language that has some degree of data on the web. I was using it for Haitian Creole in the Spanish mode the other day, and that's a language that usually doesn't have a lot of representation through just different tools that are made, but it wasn't able to pronounce things, but it was able to write to me in Creole. So okay, like, okay, we're progressing, we're almost there. But language expansion is one thing that I want to do. And then the technology behind this is also quite expensive. So I want to make, we're working right now just to, we currently cap the number of messages that people can send in a month, but I don't like that at all, because I want you to be able to just speak endlessly and practice as much as you want as a student. So that's the thing that I'm working on for, fingers crossed, either this month or next month, to have and just like send unlimited messages, just keep talking, keep practicing until you're tired and you tell the teacher when you want to take a pause, but it's not, it can keep up with you as long as you have energy and excitement to learn. Few other little
Super
bits.
exciting. The one question I have is how then do you see, or you or students, that people who've engaged with the app, are they actually then taking this into the real world, into engaging with people rather than just engaging with the app?
Good question.
Yes, that is one. I think the part that I've enjoyed most about learning Spanish are the relationships that I've formed with host families that I've lived with, people that I've met while I've traveled, teachers that I've enjoyed classes with, and we speak for hours and we have all these conversations, and relationships form as a result. I think human connection is number one, and I see this as a tool to like practice in the corner and then go use the skills that you're gaining to talk to people and feel comfortable and confident talking to people and building those relationships. So the way that I use it is like work on my Spanish, refine it, and then I go speak to my friends. I actually have a few housemates that are from Madrid. My Spanish was rusty, picked up, just had a few minutes of conversation to warm my Spanish back up, and then head out into the living room and like go speak with everyone, and they're all in Spanish, and I felt more confident to be able to go out and speak to them. So that's how I hope that people use it. I can never see technology replacing that aspect of language learning, which is the connection aspect. But I'm hoping that people have a corner that they can sort of hide in to practice when they don't feel confident and they're not yet ready to speak to other people. Maybe one other little thing to show is, I thought this was also important to include. So I added this thing to be able to modulate the speaking pace so that you can have it speak a lot slower to you if you wanted to hear the same things being read to you a lot slower.
Approved. Me gustaría primero profundizar en el conocimiento acerca de esta universidad. Improved. Me gustaría primero profundizar en el conocimiento acerca de esta universidad.
Or if you're
¿Podría usted?
heady like me, you might try speeding it up.
Improved. Me gustaría primero profundizar en el conocimiento acerca de esta universidad.
My host sister, when I studied abroad in Spain, spoke even faster than that. She was probably, I think she's probably at around 175. So if I want to practice for going back to Sevilla.
Improved. Me gustaría primero profundizar en el conocimiento acerca de esta universidad.
Yeah,
¿Podría usted proporcionarme más información sobre la
that's like about how she would speak to me. So sometimes I turned it up just to see if I can pick up on really fast Spanish. I thought this was a fun thing to keep included as well.
Jerry,
Yeah,
we are
it's
so
amazing.
excited for you.
Yeah. So when you say we, when you're working on it, who else is working on this with you? Or do you have a team? Do you have just friends? Do you have a lot of people?
No, this is a little backyard labor of love project. So I do all of the kind of decide what goes on the app. And then I wrote my brother, who's an engineer, to like code for me sometimes and help me build the back end. And he ropes in a friend. So it's me, my brother, and his friend that sometimes code on this. But if people I mean, would love to have more people jump in, make this bigger, as long as we're able to build something that's like helpful and for learners. That's my main goal. Now this is like a little backyard project that we do because we enjoy it.
I love it. It's going to be really very, very helpful for a lot of people. Tom, I'm just wondering, and the rest of you, if maybe this could be a presentation at Necessful.
Yeah, I
I
was
guess
thinking the
also,
same thing. Yeah, I was thinking, I think it
Jerry,
would.
since Tom is recording this, do you have any objections if we share this? Well, certainly within our organization, but with our colleagues that are language teachers, or even like on social media?
No, I definitely don't mind with colleagues. Social, I think it should be okay. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
You
Okay,
need
because
to
we don't
trademark
normally
it.
put our Yeah, we don't normally share our recordings outside of our group, basically, so the people that are participating here see our recordings if they want to. But I'm feeling, I mean, other than the fact that it's an extremely creative endeavor and I don't want anybody to go steal it away from you, I don't feel like there was anything that we talked about here today that would be something, problematic for us, for sure. So it's more a matter of just sharing with the world that these possibilities exist. But I don't know. I mean, we could wait for a little bit, maybe share internally with Necessful for starters or something.
Yeah, I also had a video where I presented the app. So that I think
It's
that
already out on YouTube, right? Good point.
yeah, so would if that's useful, love to share. If people have any feedback, things that they want to add, change, I just want this to be a little like community project that people can toss into. So yeah, would love to share.
Do you know of any teachers who are using it with their students in classes?
I haven't yet. So I released it and then I went into a deep work session and I haven't yet left. So I haven't actually shared this with many people besides sharing to the community that I have on YouTube. But I would love to talk to some of my old teachers and ask them because they have a bunch of students that they work with. They always tell them to go practice speaking with a friend. Well, now if someone doesn't have a friend, they could practice speaking with this in between their lessons and then come back. They could even give them a topic to talk about, or the other thing that I had in mind was maybe, if teachers have specific scenarios they want to set up or like quizzes and types of, you could really, this is a canvas, you could shape avatars to work however you want. So we could build these custom for different teachers, for different use cases, or even in the future, create the ability for you to create your own within the app to just program your own in a way that's easier.
Yeah,
the way
think
that
of
we're
those
doing it.
teachers who are looking for performance assessment tasks and the ability to be able to maybe really customize those. But this is fantastic, but it really does raise some deeper issues for us as a profession, especially vis-a-vis some of the state regs, like Lavinia has pointed out to us, because we're going to have to take a very forward-looking approach to getting some of the things changed. There are so many ways in which I see this almost as better than, for instance, Lavinia had put down that the way their regs state is that a peer has to be a certified teacher, a community member, or people in the target community, and not an AI technology. But there are many ways in which, as a learning help, this would be superior in many, many ways than to have somebody just speaking with a native speaker, for instance, because of the ability to correct, because of the non-threatening aspect of it, because of the ability to go over and over, because of the ability to have a transcript.
And when you think how it could be used for the professional areas in technical schools, or just in classes that are, medical language for high school students, or if you're going for a certification in a certain professional area, I mean, it's going to be huge, because that's a really an area where you cannot find a lot of native speakers.
Well, I
Right.
think that brings the point really that what's so neat about this is, like you said, Jerry, you wanted to get to the C2 level. Well, there are very valid instruments that can then measure that. So you've got the connection between the independent learning and the valid assessment, which this allows people to, especially even at the classroom level, to go beyond where they already are, and yet get certified way beyond what perhaps they can do in a classroom or in certain language learning environments. It's a fabulous project.
It is. It does.
Yeah, and I think the irony is that we are probably increasing the likelihood that students would be inclined to go and talk with native speakers or have those interactions by having had the opportunity to develop to a confidence level that was appropriate for them. So so rather than say discouraging or reducing the kind of interpersonal, like people interactions, you could greatly increase that, I think.
And another question, you referred to using C2, which, it's the European way of measuring proficiency. Does it have a way to use the ACTFL scale of proficiency to moderate the level of communication?
So what I love about this again is that because you can train on top of these models in really creative ways. So we could prepare a data set with a bunch of examples saying, this is what a B1 looks like. Actually, I know the other scale, I haven't used it. So, but we could say, this is what level 1 looks like. This is what level 2 looks like, level 3 and level 4. Give it a tons of examples, and then ask it to match this level when a student asks to speak at a more advanced level. What I did for the professor, for example, was I give examples of this. These are some advanced Spanish conversations. Mimic the flow, the formality, and the advanced grammar of this level, this style of conversation. And then it's like, great. And now I can have it's able to take that, run with it through whatever topics that I want to discuss. But that's how I got it to sort of change levels and change its register with this avatar.
It's great.
Yeah, if you really do have an eye towards the American market, I think, I don't want to speak for the group, but I think we'd be happy to give you any support we could about ways to make it more of a close interconnection with the ACTFL scale, the proficiency guidelines, and the can-do statements, which are really helpful for helping students target their next learning goals. But that would be great. And I've been amazed just on ChatGPT, for instance, at how quickly it learned the can-do statements and the proficiency levels, that we can just say, hey, yeah, give me, 5 can-do statements for interpersonal at the intermediate mid proficiency level, and boom, it'll do it. And then you could say, now do it in the context of the conversation that I've just been having about what food to have.
That's a
You know,
great
there's
example.
another audience besides our our learners in school, and that is teachers who are trying to reach a high enough level of proficiency to qualify for certification. And we actually have a committee right now in Washington State that is meeting on this very issue, because when the requirements were set most recently, updated around 2008, 9, 10, world language teachers had to demonstrate advanced low proficiency, which would be like probably about a B1 or so. But bilingual ed teachers had to have advanced mid. And there's a lot of teachers that can't reach that level. And so it has really discouraged them from going into the profession. But part of it is that no one has ever done anything with them about understanding proficiency, especially like heritage speakers. They often have never had an academic class, so they just don't have that academic language, just like you were describing. And instead of sending them in for an expensive assessment and then having them fail, they spent some time exploring, what am I able to do? What do I need to be able to do? How can I do this in a nice, safe environment? And especially if it didn't cost them, then I think we would would tremendously contribute to increasing the pool of teachers who could move into certification.
I think having a pool or repository of exemplars for different proficiency levels in the different modes of communication, like speaking and reading and writing, I think would be enormously helpful to learners, whether they are young learners or teachers, because that's what we've always been clamoring for. Teachers are reluctant to share their students' work. It's a whole thing about, getting permission and all that. But hey, a machine's doing it perfect, no problem. I think that would be so helpful at every level to be able to point to something and say, okay, this is, and show this maybe the same content in up the proficiency scale. This is what it looks at novice low, what it looks at novice mid, and how it morphs to advanced. I think that would be incredibly helpful.
Maybe one other thing I keep in mind as well is models are getting really good, but they still hallucinate. So there'll still be mistakes here and there, which is why I always, like, in the apps onboarding, I'm like, hey, please actually talk to natives and teachers to validate the things that you're learning. Use this as a practice tool, but then go validate it out with teachers. It'll be a while before we have the level. Even if we're at 99% efficiency or 95% efficiency, I never want a learner to learn the wrong thing and just have it baked in and never actually test it out in the field. So I think that's also something important, just in the general sense of when people are using AI. But I think it also applies when you're just learning from online tools. I've learned some concepts from different websites or grammar books that found out, like, oh, it's a bit more nuanced than that. And speaking with natives and teachers has always been a helpful part. So I think that's something that I want to continue to promote, even while people are practicing and learning with tools like this.
You humans make mistakes too, so.
Yep. Well, Jerry, I can't begin to express how much we appreciate you taking your time today to walk us through this and to give us a personal introduction to LangTalk. It's going to be a tremendous tool for helping people learn languages. And you've certainly established yourself as a friend to the profession, as well as a friend to the language learning community. And we're deeply grateful. Now we've really got some work to do because of the implications that come from this. And I appreciate you having this so that it can nudge us so that we can do the right thing for those that we serve and for the learners. So just thank you very much. Anybody else, any final words before we let Jerry go?
Just any way that we could help you. We are here and willing to do whatever, because this is such a great tool. We really appreciate your work. And if we could do anything, just let us know.
And most of us are retired.
Right. I do have one request to propose to you. I think we sent you, I hope, the links to our last Phil brief, which was about the resources, and we included a whole section about large language models and AI, and we put in links to several of your YouTube videos and just say how much we learned from that. And Tom, be sure to send it to him in case he hasn't read that before. But now we're working on the third brief that's going to focus on kind of from teacher to facilitator. And I'm thinking that whether it would be that we link to a YouTube that you might do or something that you could write up, or an appendix or something that we could include, but that talks about how you've created these kind of different avatars, recognizing that there's different ways that you want to interact with someone who's coaching you on learning a language. I think that could be a really nice complement to hearing directly from the classroom teachers, like what they've been doing, but just another take on that whole thing. So
Well,
if
Michelle,
you create
wouldn't that
something
be
like that,
cool?
we'd love it.
Wouldn't that be cool to have in the middle of the article a link to Jerry talking to readers of the article about the content of it?
Oh, that'd be interesting too. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
No,
Well,
we'd
we'll
love to.
email you about that with more details, but
Please.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you for having me. Like again, I think this is one of my favorite communities. It's I was super excited when I found out something like this existed. So I thought people just kind of learn languages all on their own. So
We
thank you
certainly
for
are your
all this.
cheerleaders, so
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you so much.
thank you.
Thank you again.
Thanks, Jerry.
Cheers.